I've watched thousands of gardeners rip a perennial out of the ground and toss it on the compost pile. And here's the sad part. They did it exactly one season before that plant would have finally paid them back. So if you've got a plant out there that's 2 years in and still hasn't earned its keep, do me a favor. Don't touch it yet. Today, I'll walk you through 5 common perennials and the exact year each one actually starts paying off. Because the plant most folks give up on, that's the one that feeds you the longest. Stick with me, and I'll tell you which one it is. Now, here's the thing. I'm not here to sell you a dream. I've gathered the research from the extension offices and the old-timers who've grown these plants for decades. Not the promises printed on the back of a seed packet. And it all comes down to one simple idea. The word low maintenance was never a lie. It was just explained badly. Real badly. So let's fix that today. Let me show you something I call the Perennial Reality Calendar. Most folks think low maintenance means less work. It doesn't. It means the work moves. It gets spread out across the years. For one plant on this list, that wait is a full 3 years, and then it feeds you for 15. Here's why this works the way it does. Years 1 and 2 are what gardeners call establishment. That's watering, weeding, and waiting. Lots of waiting. This is the hardest stretch, and it gives you almost nothing back. So this is exactly where people quit. One of my subscribers put it perfectly. She said she'd thrown out more healthy plants in year 2 than she ever lost to a hard frost. And that breaks my heart a little. Because year 2 is the home stretch, right before the good part. Years 3 through 5, the work changes. Now your plant is strong. The job becomes keeping it in line. Trimming, thinning, holding it back. And year 5 and beyond? That's the real reward. That's true low maintenance. That's harvest. So remember this. Year 1, you feed the plant. Year 5, the plant feeds you. Year 1, you feed the plant. Year 5, the plant feeds you. Hold on to that. Now, let's walk through 5 of them. Number 1, asparagus. And folks, this is the one I promised you, the plant most people quit on and the one that pays the longest. Here's the honest truth about asparagus. In year 1, you don't cut a single spear. Not one. In year 2, you take just a light harvest, maybe 2 weeks worth. It's not until year 3 that you get the full 6 to 8 weeks of those tender green spears. I know. 2 years of waiting feels like forever. But don't panic. Here's why this works. Every spear you let grow turns into a tall, ferny plant. That fern soaks up the sun all summer and sends the energy back down into the roots, into what's called the crown. Cut too early and you starve that crown for good. You weaken the plant for the rest of its life. But wait it out and here's your payoff. A healthy asparagus bed will feed you for 12 to 15 years. Some go even longer. My grandmother's generation knew this. They planted asparagus once and let it feed the whole family for the better part of 2 decades. And here's the part that really gets me. A viewer out in Ohio told me her asparagus patch is older than her grandkids, and it still sends up spears every single spring. Think about that. You buy the crowns one time, just a few dollars each. Compare that to buying bundles of asparagus at the store week after week, year after year. The math isn't even close. That's the whole magic of a good perennial. You pay once, up front, in time, and a little patience. Then it pays you back for years. One quick tip: stop cutting by early to mid-June. After that, let the ferns grow so the crown can store up energy for next spring. That's it. So asparagus is the patience crop. But the next one fools people in the opposite direction. Number 2. Rosemary, grown as a hedge. Now, you've heard rosemary is tough as nails, drought-proof, plant it and forget it. And that's true, eventually. But not in year 1. Here's the thing nobody tells you. In its first year, rosemary is slow. Really slow. It's busy growing roots underground where you can't see a thing. The top barely moves. And get this, that first year you actually need to keep the soil damp. The very plant everyone calls drought-proof needs regular water just to get started. So if your young rosemary looks like it's sitting still, don't panic. It's working. It's just working below the surface. By year 2 or 3, you'll see it take off, growing a foot or more each summer. By year 5, you can have a real hedge, 4 to 6 feet tall, that you can run your hand across and smell from clear across the yard. Now, one warning, and this is the big one. Rosemary's worst enemy isn't cold, it's wet feet. Soggy soil rots the roots faster than any frost ever could. So plant it somewhere with good drainage. On zones, rosemary lives happily outdoors in zones 7 through 10. If you're in zone 6, look for a hardy variety like Arp or Hill Hardy. Colder than that, and you'll grow it in a pot and bring it inside for winter. What zone are you gardening in? Tell me down in the comments. I read them. That's rosemary. Slow to start, but worth the wait. The next plant, though, the next one is one I'd tell you to think twice about. Number 3. Mugwort. And this one's different. Mugwort doesn't have a payoff year. It has a never-ending maintenance year. Here's why I'm including it anyway. Because somebody, somewhere, talked a lot of folks into planting an aggressive spreader, and now they're dealing with it. Mugwort spreads underground with roots called rhizomes. They run sideways, fast, in every direction. And here's the part that catches folks off guard. Even a tiny piece of root left in the ground will sprout a whole new plant. So whatever you do, don't till it. Don't run a tiller through that bed thinking you'll chop it up and be done. Every piece you cut just becomes a new plant. You'd be planting more of it. So how do you handle it? A few honest options. Grow it in a container, never loose in the bed. Sink a deep barrier into the ground around it. Or smother the patch with heavy landscape fabric. And pull the young shoots by hand, early, before those rhizomes have a chance to spread. A quick safety note here, because I care about you and your family. Don't panic, this part's quick. Mugwort is a known pollen plant. For folks with hay fever, it can make things worse in late summer and fall. And we're talking about it strictly as a garden plant, not for eating, not for tea. The NIH even advises against using mugwort if you're pregnant. So wear your gloves when you handle it and keep it as a plant in the ground, nothing more. Here's the real comfort though. If you've got mugwort or English ivy turning your yard into a jungle, that's not your failure. That's just a plant doing what it does. Managing it is the whole job. There's no year 3 reward coming. So contain it or pull it, and don't feel bad about it for 1 second. All right, deep breath. The last 2 are friendlier, I promise. Number 4, lemongrass. This one's the it depends plant. You'll read that lemongrass is a perennial that comes back every year. And that's true, but only if you're in the right place. Here's the simple version. Lemongrass is a true perennial only in zones 10 and 11. There, it stays outside all year long. In zones 8B and 9, the roots can pull through with a little protection. But in zone 8 and anywhere colder, lemongrass won't survive the winter outdoors. You grow it as an annual or you bring it inside. So if your lemongrass died over winter and you're in, say, zone 6, you didn't do anything wrong. It was never going to make it out there. That's just the zone talking. Here's the good news. Bringing it inside is easy. Before the first hard frost, dig up a clump. Trim the stalks down to a few inches. Split it into smaller clumps if you like. Pot it up, set it in a bright south-facing window and keep the soil just barely moist. Come spring, you plant it back out. All you need is a shovel and a pot. That's it. So lemongrass isn't really low maintenance or high maintenance. It's zone maintenance. Know your zone and you'll know your plan. Now for the last one. And this one's a bit of an old-timer's secret. Number 5. Tree collards. If you've never heard of these, you're not alone. They're a leafy green that grows tall, almost like a small tree, and growers say they can keep feeding you for years. But here's the honest part. You don't grow tree collards from seed. You grow them from a cutting, a piece of an existing plant. And you want a green, fresh cutting, not an old woody one. The woody pieces will root, but they stay stunted. Now, the first 6 months are everything. Here's why this works the way it does. When you stick that cutting in the soil, the leaves actually grow first, living off the energy stored in the stem. The roots come later. It takes somewhere around 4 to 8 weeks before real roots get going. So during those early months, that cutting is fragile. Baby it. Keep it sheltered, keep it watered, and don't expect much up top right away. Get it through that first stretch though, and you've basically won. Growers report that in mild climates, tree collards can keep producing for up to 20 years. They're hardy down to about 20 degrees, so in cold country you'll need to protect them, but they'll still give you years of greens. One quick tip. Take a backup cutting or two early on and root them in a jar of water. That way, if a hard winter takes your main plant, you've still got the line going. The proof is in the pudding with this one. Folks who stick with it swear by it. Okay, so you've got a perennial out there right now, and you're not sure whether to wait or to give up. Let me give you 3 simple questions to decide. Go ahead and write these down. Question 1. Is the plant green and growing even if it's not feeding you yet? If the leaves are healthy and there's new top growth, that's a plant doing exactly what it should. Wait it out. Question 2. Is your problem that it's slow or that it's spreading out of control? Slow means wait. Spreading means it's containment time, like our friend the mugwort. Those are 2 very different jobs. Question 3. Did you plant it in the right zone? If you put a zone 10 plant in a zone 6 yard, well, that was never the plant's fault, and it sure wasn't yours. You just need a new plan, like growing it in a pot. Here's the one thing I really want you to remember. If your plant is green and growing, you are not behind. You're right on time. Give it one more season. And before you go, let me leave you with the whole calendar in about 10 seconds. Low maintenance was never a lie. It was just a promise that pays off in year 3 or 5, not year 1. And the folks who planted asparagus back in your grandmother's day, they weren't more patient than you. They just knew the timeline. Now you do too. Asparagus, 12 to 15 years from a single planting. Rosemary, a real hedge by year 5. Mugwort, contain it and don't look back. Lemongrass, mind your zone. And tree collards, baby them through the first 6 months. So here's my simple rule for all of them. Plant it right, wait it out, and let the plant feed you. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me down in the comments. Are you going to give that struggling perennial one more season? Yes or no? Just type it. I read every single one. Until next time, happy gardening.